She wanted to cleanse us. But all she did was poison us. Witch.
The kale smoothie looked like something that crawled out of a swamp and died there. Green, chunky, with little bits of what Amelia called superfood floating like pond scum on top. I watched my wife blend it with the enthusiasm of a mad scientist, her perfectly manicured fingers dancing over the buttons of our $400 Vitamix. "Will, you really should try this," she said, not looking up from her creation. "Dr. Bell says that chlorophyll is basically liquid sunlight for your cells." Dr. Bell. Always Dr. Bell these days, her boss at the wellness center, the man who'd apparently revolutionized her entire worldview in the 6 months since she'd started working there. The same Dr. Bell who texted her at 11 p.m. about urgent wellness consultations. "I'll stick with coffee," I said, pouring myself a cup from our regular coffee maker. Not the fancy espresso machine we'd bought last Christmas, which now sat unused because caffeine was apparently toxic to the spiritual chakras, or some such BS. Amelia finally looked at me, her blue eyes holding that particular mix of pity and superiority I'd grown to hate. "Your body is a temple, Will. You wouldn't pour motor oil into a Ferrari, would you?" "No, but I wouldn't pour pond water into it either." I took a long sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter normalcy of it. "Where's Tessa?" "Getting ready for school. I packed her lunch already." She gestured toward the counter where a small metal lunchbox sat, decorated with unicorns that seemed to mock me with their innocent smiles. I walked over and opened it. Inside were raw carrot sticks, celery, and what looked like a handful of sprouts that belonged in a pet store, not a lunchbox. No sandwich, no crackers, no actual food that an 8-year-old might want to eat. "Amelia, she's a kid. She needs real food." "This is real food. It's alive food. Cooked food is dead food, Will. The enzymes are destroyed by heat. Dr. Bell has extensive research on this." Dr. Bell again. I closed the lunchbox with more force than necessary. "She's 8 years old. She needs protein. She needs calories. She needs to learn healthy habits early. Jess says her kids have never been sick since they went raw." Jess, Amelia's new best friend from the wellness center. A woman who looked like she'd been carved out of beef jerky and had the personality to match. The kind of person who corrected your grammar in casual conversation and always knew exactly what everyone else should be doing with their lives. "When's the last time you asked Tessa what she wants for lunch?" Amelia's face hardened. "Children don't know what's good for them. That's why they have parents." She grabbed her green smoothie and took a long drink, leaving a mustache of plant matter on her upper lip. "I'm late for work." She kissed my cheek absently, her lips cold from the smoothie, and grabbed her purse. "Don't forget I have that workshop tonight. I'll be home late." Another workshop. Another evening with Dr. Bell and the raw food cult. I'd started thinking of them that way after attending one of their meetings, sitting in a circle, sharing testimonials about how raw foods had changed their lives, speaking in hushed, reverent tones about cleansing and purification. It felt less like nutrition and more like religion. The front door closed with a soft click, and I was alone with my coffee and my growing certainty that my marriage was rotting from the inside out, just like the vegetables in Tessa's lunchbox would be by noon. "Dad?" Tessa appeared in the kitchen doorway, her school backpack slung over one small shoulder. She looked thin. Too thin. When had that happened? "Hey, sweetheart, ready for school?" She nodded, but her eyes drifted to the lunchbox on the counter. I saw something there. Resignation, maybe, or hunger. "Tell you what," I said, making a decision that would probably start another fight with Amelia. "Let's stop at the store on the way to school. Get you something good for lunch." Her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Can I get a sandwich?" "You can get whatever you want." 20 minutes later, we stood in the school lunch aisle of the grocery store. Tessa held a pre-made turkey sandwich like it was made of gold, her small fingers tracing the plastic wrapper. "Mom's going to be mad," she said quietly. "Mom doesn't have to know everything." I grabbed a bag of chips and a juice box. "This can be our secret." She smiled then, really smiled, and I realized it had been weeks since I'd seen her look genuinely happy. What kind of father was I that I hadn't noticed my own daughter was miserable? I dropped her off at Riverside Elementary with her contraband lunch, watching her skip toward the building with more energy than I'd seen in months. Maybe it was just the promise of real food, or maybe it was having one parent who still remembered what childhood was supposed to look like. My phone buzzed as I drove to work. A text from Pete, my best friend since college and the only person who still called me on my BS. "Coffee later? Need to vent about the divorce papers." Pete's wife had left him 6 months ago, taking half of everything and most of his dignity. He'd been living in a studio apartment ever since, surviving on takeout and cynicism. At least he was honest about his situation. I was still pretending mine was salvageable. Can't. Amelia has another workshop tonight. Workshop or workshop? He texted back. I didn't answer because I didn't want to think about what the quotation marks might mean. At work, I buried myself in blueprints and building codes, the reliable logic of structural engineering. Load-bearing walls didn't lie to you about their intentions. Concrete didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Steel didn't suddenly decide it wanted to be bamboo because some guru said metal was toxic to the soul. My phone rang at 2:15. The caller ID showed Riverside Elementary. Mr. Turner, this is Mrs. Patel, the school nurse. I need you to come pick up Tessa. My blood went cold. What happened? Is she hurt? She fainted during lunch. She's okay now, but I think we need to talk. I was in my car before she finished the sentence, driving too fast through suburban streets that suddenly seemed endless. The school's parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to teachers and staff. I found Mrs. Patel in the nurse's office, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a stern mouth. Tessa sat on the examination table, looking small and pale. She managed a weak smile when she saw me. What happened? I asked, kneeling beside her. She fainted during lunch, Mrs. Patel said. When's the last time she had a proper meal? She had breakfast this morning. But even as I said it, I realized I hadn't actually seen her eat anything. Just Amelia's green smoothie sitting on the counter, untouched. Mrs. Patel opened a manila folder and pulled out several small plastic bags. Inside were the contents of Tessa's recent lunches: wilted vegetables, untouched sprouts, carrot sticks with tiny bite marks that suggested desperate hunger rather than appetite. Mr. Turner, I've been a school nurse for 20 years. I know the signs of malnutrition when I see them. The word hit me like a physical blow. Malnutrition. My daughter. In suburban Massachusetts, in 2024, with two parents who had good jobs and health insurance and a mortgage on a 4-bedroom house. Her teacher, Miss Grant, has been saving these. She's been concerned for weeks. Why didn't anyone call me sooner? We called the emergency contact number. Your wife said Tessa was on a special diet for health reasons and that we shouldn't interfere. Of course she did. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw what I'd been too distracted to notice. The hollowed cheeks, the way her school uniform hung loose on her frame, the dark circles under her eyes that I had attributed to staying up too late reading. Can I take her home? I think that would be best. And Mr. Turner? Mrs. Patel's voice was gentle but firm. This can't continue. If we don't see improvement in her nutrition and energy levels, we'll have to involve Child Protective Services. The drive home was quiet. Tessa dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted from her ordeal. I kept glancing at her, seeing her differently now. Not just my daughter, but a child who was literally wasting away under my own roof while I worried about marriage counseling and mortgage payments. At home, I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup comfort food that Amelia would have called processed poison. Tessa ate like she'd been stranded on a desert island, finishing every bite and asking for more. Don't tell Mom, she said quietly, echoing my words from that morning. Sweetheart, why don't you like the lunches Mom makes? She looked down at her empty bowl. They taste like grass, and the other kids make fun of me. They call me Rabbit Girl. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Not just anger. I'd been angry for months. This was something else. Something that felt like the moment when you realize the foundation of your house has been slowly cracking, and now you can see daylight through the walls. My phone buzzed. Amelia, texting from work. How's Tessa? Heard she had a little episode at school. Probably just adjustment to the cleanse. Dr. Bell says it's normal. Dr. Bell says. The man had an opinion about everything, apparently, including my daughter's health, which he'd never actually assessed since he wasn't her doctor. Hell, I wasn't even sure he was a real doctor. I texted back. She's fine. Coming home early tonight? Can't. Important workshop on cellular regeneration. We'll be late. Another workshop. Another evening of my wife choosing her guru over her family. I looked at Tessa, who was already looking better with some real food in her system, and made a decision. It was time to find out exactly what was happening at these workshops, and it was time to find out who Dr. Bell really was. That evening, after I'd fed Tessa a proper dinner of chicken and rice that she devoured like a starving animal, I drove to the address Amelia had given me for her workshop. The Harmony Wellness Center sat in a converted warehouse in an industrial part of town, the kind of place that looked like it might house a meth lab or an underground fight club. I parked across the street and waited. Cars began arriving around 7, mostly expensive SUVs and luxury sedans driven by women who looked like they shopped at Whole Foods and had strong opinions about gluten. I recognized some faces from Amelia's social media posts. Jess pulled up in a white BMW, her angular face set in its usual expression of moral superiority. At 7:30, Amelia arrived. She parked near the entrance and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing her hair and applying lipstick with the care of someone preparing for a date, which I was beginning to suspect might not be far from the truth. I waited another 10 minutes, then approached the building. The front entrance was locked, but I could hear voices from inside. A side door was propped open for ventilation, and I slipped through into a hallway that smelled of incense and something else, something organic and unpleasant, like compost. The voices led me to a large room where about 30 people sat in a circle on yoga mats. At the center stood Dr. Henry Bell, and I got my first good look at the man who'd been reshaping my wife's worldview. He was tall and lean, in the way that suggested either excellent genetics or an eating disorder. His hair was silver gray, pulled back in a small ponytail, and he wore the kind of linen clothing that cost more than my monthly car payment while trying to look humble and earthy. His voice was smooth, hypnotic, with just a trace of an accent that might have been British or might have been BS. "The modern world has poisoned us," he was saying, pacing slowly around the circle. "Our bodies, our minds, our spirits. We've forgotten how to nourish ourselves with the pure energy of living foods." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. I spotted Amelia sitting cross-legged near the front, her face upturned toward Dr. Bell with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Adoration, hunger, the kind of look she used to give me during our first year of marriage. "Who can share their progress this week?" Dr. Bell asked. Hands shot up around the circle. A woman in her 40s spoke about how raw foods had cured her chronic fatigue. A man in his 60s claimed that avoiding cooked foods had restored his vision. Each testimonial was more outrageous than the last, and Dr. Bell nodded sagely at each one, occasionally touching the speaker's shoulder in a gesture that seemed both paternal and intimate. "Amelia," he said, his voice warm, "how is your family's transition progressing?" My wife stood, smoothing her yoga pants. "It's been challenging. My husband is resistant to change. He's still poisoning himself and trying to poison our daughter with processed foods. Poisoning our daughter." I gripped the doorframe to keep from charging into the room. "Resistance is natural," Dr. Bell said, moving closer to Amelia. "Those who are deeply toxified often fight hardest against purification. They're obsessed with the chemicals, the artificial flavors, the dead energy of cooked food." "What should I do?" Amelia asked, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Submission. My independent, strong-willed wife was asking this charlatan for permission to live her own life. Dr. Bell placed his hand on her shoulder, letting it linger. "Sometimes we must make difficult choices to protect those we love. Your daughter's spiritual development is at stake, her cellular integrity, her future." More murmurs of agreement. These people were nodding along as this man essentially told my wife to choose his dietary religion over her husband and child's well-being. "I have a special cleansing retreat next weekend," Dr. Bell continued. "Adults only, unfortunately, but it might help you find the clarity you need. Adults only. A weekend retreat with my wife and her charismatic guru." I'd heard enough. I slipped back out through the side door and sat in my car, hands shaking with rage. Not just at Dr. Bell, though he was clearly a hunter in guru's clothing. I was angry at Amelia for being so easily manipulated, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, angry at the whole situation that had somehow turned my normal suburban life into a bad Lifetime movie. My phone buzzed. Pete texting again. "You okay? You've been weird lately." I called him. "Will? What's wrong?" "I think my wife is in a cult." Silence on the other end. Then, "Come over, bring beer." Pete's studio apartment was a monument to divorced male depression takeout containers, empty beer bottles, and a mattress on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes. But it was honest depression, not the kind wrapped in spiritual superiority and green smoothies. I told him everything. The raw food obsession, the weight loss, Tessa fainting at school, the workshop I'd just witnessed. Pete listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making disgusted noises. "So what's your plan?" he asked when I finished. I don't know. Confront her? Drag her to marriage counseling? Call a deprogrammer? Or you could fight fire with fire. What do you mean? Pete opened another beer and leaned back in his lawn chair, the only furniture in his living room. This Dr. Bell guy is running a scam, right? Separating lonely housewives from their money and probably their undies. There's got to be something you can use against him. Like what? I don't know. Fake credentials, tax evasion, sexual maltreatment? Guys like this always have skeletons. It wasn't a bad idea. If I could expose Dr. Bell as a fraud, maybe Amelia would snap out of whatever spell he'd cast on her. Maybe I could save my marriage and my daughter without having to choose between them. I'll need help, I said. I'm in. Sarah took half my stuff, but she left me my investigative skills. Pete had been a journalist before his marriage, back when newspapers still existed. Besides, I've got nothing but time and a burning desire to watch someone else's life implode for a change. We shook hands like we were sealing a business deal instead of planning to destroy a cult leader. It felt good to have an ally, someone who understood that sometimes the system fails and you have to take matters into your own hands. I drove home around midnight to find Amelia already in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her breathing was too controlled, too even. She was awake, probably wondering where I'd been. Good. Let her wonder. I checked on Tessa, who was sleeping peacefully with a full stomach for the first time in weeks. Her color looked better already. Children are resilient when you actually feed them properly. In my home office, I opened my laptop and started researching Dr. Henry Bell. What I found was interesting. The man had no verifiable medical degree from any accredited institution. His doctorate came from something called the Universal Wellness Institute, which appeared to be a diploma mill that operated out of a P.O. box in Nevada. His social media presence was carefully curated. Photos of him at expensive restaurants, eating cooked food, I noticed, luxury vacations, and motivational quotes about living authentically. For someone who preached about rejecting material possessions, he seemed to own quite a few of them. But the most interesting discovery was his real estate holdings. Dr. Bell owned 3 properties in the area, including a lakefront cabin that he'd purchased 6 months ago, right around the time Amelia had started working at the wellness center. A lakefront cabin, perfect for private retreats with devoted followers. I printed everything I could find and created a file. Tomorrow, Pete and I would start digging deeper. We'd find out exactly what Dr. Henry Bell was selling and, more importantly, what he was buying with the money from desperate housewives seeking meaning in their empty suburban lives. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife is beautiful when she's enlightened. I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice water. Someone was watching. Someone knew I'd been at the workshop. Someone wanted me to know they had access to my wife. I checked the locks on all the doors and windows, then sat in the dark living room with a baseball bat across my knees, listening to the house settle around me. Outside, the suburban night was quiet and peaceful, full of sleeping families in their safe little homes. But safety was an illusion. I was beginning to understand that the real danger wasn't some stranger breaking into your house in the middle of the night. The real danger was the person lying next to you in bed, the one who'd already let someone else inside your life, your marriage, your family. The person you trusted most was often the one who could destroy you most completely. The next morning, Amelia was gone before I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, and there was no note, no text, no explanation, just the lingering scent of her perfume and an empty coffee mug in the sink that smelled like grass clippings. I made Tessa scrambled eggs and toast, watching her eat with the focused intensity of someone making up for lost time. She'd gained a little weight already, just from 2 days of real food. It was amazing how quickly children bounced back when you actually nourished them. Dad, can I ask you something? She said between bites. Anything, sweetheart. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would you ask that? Because she's always angry at you now. And she talks about you like you're bad. I sat down across from her, trying to find words that wouldn't traumatize an 8-year-old. Your mom and I are having some problems right now, but whatever happens, it's not your fault, and both of us love you very much. She nodded solemnly, too mature for her age. Jamie's parents got divorced last year. She said it was better after because they stopped fighting all the time. How do you feel about that? Scared, she admitted, but also maybe a little relieved. I don't like it when you guys fight. I reached across and squeezed her hand. I'm going to do everything I can to fix this, okay? but if I can't, we'll figure it out together. After I dropped her at school, I met Pete at a coffee shop downtown. He'd been busy since our conversation the night before, using his old journalism contacts to dig into Dr. Bell's background. Your guru's real name is Henry Belmont, Pete said, sliding a manila folder across the table. He's originally from Ohio, where he was sued twice for practicing medicine without a license. Before that, he ran a series of spiritual healing centers that were shut down by the state health department. I opened the folder and found a treasure trove of information. Court documents, newspaper clippings, testimonials from former followers who'd lost money, and in some cases their health following Dr. Bell's advice. Look at page 3, Pete said. I flipped to a newspaper article from 5 years ago. The headline read, Wellness Guru Accused of Sexual Misconduct. Below was a photo of a younger Dr. Bell being led away from a courthouse in handcuffs. He was never convicted, Pete continued. The charges were dropped when the witnesses recanted their testimony. But there's a pattern here. He targets middle-aged women going through life transitions, divorce, empty nest syndrome, midlife crisis, gets them dependent on his approval, isolates them from their support systems, then takes their money, and sometimes more. How many sufferers? That we know of? At least a dozen over the past 10 years. But most don't come forward. They're embarrassed, or they still believe in him, or he's convinced them that speaking out would be spiritually damaging. I studied the photos in the file. Different women, different cities, but they all had the same look in their eyes. The hollow stare of someone who'd been psychologically manipulated and financially drained. There's more, Pete said. I found his tax records. The man's been reporting an income of about $30,000 a year, but he's living like he makes 10 times that. Either he's committing tax fraud, or he's got income streams he's not reporting. Like what? Cash payments from private clients, expensive retreats that aren't advertised publicly, maybe blackmail if he's got dirt on his followers. The pieces were starting to fit together. Dr. Bell wasn't just running a wellness scam. He was running a sophisticated operation designed to extract maximum value from vulnerable women. And my wife was his latest target. We need more, I said. Something concrete, something that will make Amelia see what he really is. I might have an idea about that. Pete pulled out his phone and showed me a website. Look familiar? It was a dating site profile for Henry B., 42, wellness professional. The photos were recent, and the profile described him as single and seeking a spiritual connection with an evolved woman. He's actively hunting for new sufferers, I said. Gets better. Look at the messages. Pete had somehow gained access to Dr. Bell's dating profile messages. There were dozens of conversations with women, all following the same pattern. He'd identify their vulnerabilities, recent divorce, health problems, spiritual seeking, then gradually introduce his wellness philosophy while building emotional closeness. How did you get these? Let's just say my ex-wife wasn't the only one who learned some useful skills during our marriage. Pete's smile was grim. The point is, we've got him. This is carnivory behavior. We can expose him. But will Amelia believe it? She's so deep in his web, she might think we fabricated everything. Then we need to catch him in the act. Get him on record saying something that proves he's a fraud. I thought about the anonymous text I'd received the night before. Someone was watching. Someone who wanted to intimidate me. But maybe I could turn that to my advantage. I have an idea, I said, but it's risky. That afternoon, I called the wellness center and asked to speak with Amelia. The receptionist, a young woman with the breathless enthusiasm of a recent convert, told me she was in a private session with Dr. Bell and couldn't be disturbed. A private session, at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I drove to the wellness center and parked where I could see the entrance. An hour later, Amelia emerged looking flushed and disheveled, her hair slightly messed and her lipstick gone. She checked her reflection in her phone camera and reapplied her makeup before getting in her car. 5 minutes after she left, Dr. Bell appeared. He stood in the doorway, watching her drive away with a satisfied smile that made my skin crawl. Then he noticed my car, and his expression changed. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and went back inside. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. She tastes like enlightenment. This time, I was ready. I had installed a tracking app that Pete had recommended, and I immediately forwarded the message to him. Within minutes, he texted back with a phone number and an address. The phone was registered to Henry Belmont at his lakefront cabin. Dr. Bell was so arrogant, so confident in his power over his followers, that he was taunting me from his own device. That evening, Amelia came home late again, claiming she'd been at another workshop. She moved through our house like a stranger, barely acknowledging me or Tessa. When I tried to talk to her about our daughter's health, she brushed me off. Tessa is fine. She's just detoxifying. Dr. Bell says it's normal for children to resist the cleansing process. Dr. Bell isn't a pediatrician. He's not even a real doctor. Her eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand anything about wellness. You're so trapped in your toxic masculinity that you can't see the truth. Toxic masculinity. She was even using his language now. Amelia, I love you, but I'm worried about you. This isn't like you. This is exactly like me. This is who I really am, underneath all the conditioning and programming. She moved toward the stairs, then turned back. I'm going to the retreat this weekend. Alone. What about Tessa? She can stay with you. Maybe some time apart will help you both see clearly. She went upstairs, and I heard the bedroom door close with a soft but definitive click, the sound of a marriage ending, one small decision at a time. I checked on Tessa, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up at me with worried eyes. Is Mom sick? She asked. It was a perceptive question from an 8-year-old. In a way, Amelia was sick, infected with someone else's delusions, poisoned by manipulation disguised as enlightenment. I think she might be, I said, but we're going to help her get better. That night, I lay awake listening to Amelia breathe beside me, planning my next move. She was going to the retreat this weekend, which meant she'd be alone with Dr. Bell at his lakefront cabin, away from witnesses, away from the safety of the group dynamic. It was the perfect opportunity to expose him. And if I was lucky, it might be the shock Amelia needed to snap out of whatever trance he'd put her under. But if I was wrong, if she was too far gone to save, then at least I'd have the evidence I needed to protect my daughter. Either way, this weekend would decide the future of my family. Friday evening, I watched Amelia pack for her weekend retreat with the methodical care of someone preparing for a religious pilgrimage. She folded her clothes with unusual attention, selected her most flattering outfits, and packed toiletries that included items she hadn't used in months. Expensive perfume, body lotion, lingerie I'd bought her for our anniversary that she'd never worn. It's just a wellness retreat, I said, leaning against the bedroom doorframe. It's a spiritual awakening, she corrected, not looking at me. Dr. Bell says I'm ready for the advanced teachings. Advanced teachings. I wondered what euphemism that was covering. How many people will be there? It's a very exclusive group, only the most committed students. She zipped her bag closed. I probably won't have cell service, so don't try to reach me. Of course not. Can't have husbands interfering with the guru's private time with his devoted followers. After she left, I put Tessa to bed early and called Pete. You ready for this? He asked. As ready as I can be for breaking into a cult leader's property to spy on my wife. We're not breaking in. We're conducting surveillance from public property. There's a hiking trail that runs along the back of his land. Pete had spent the day scouting Dr. Bell's lakefront cabin. The property was isolated, surrounded by woods, with only one access road. Perfect for privacy, but also perfect for trapping someone who might want to leave. We drove out there around 10 p.m., parking at a trail head about half a mile from the cabin. Pete had brought equipment that would have impressed a private investigator night vision binoculars, a camera with a telephoto lens, and recording devices that could pick up conversations from 100 yards away. Where did you get all this stuff? I asked as we hiked through the dark woods. Amazon. Amazing what you can buy these days. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the lake, all glass and modern angles designed to blend with the natural environment. Lights were on in several rooms, and I could see figures moving around inside. Pete set up his equipment behind a fallen log that gave us a clear view of the main living area. Through the telephoto lens, I could see Amelia sitting on a white leather couch, a wine glass in her hand. She was laughing at something Dr. Bell had said, her head thrown back in a way that used to be reserved for me. He sat close beside her, close enough that their knees were touching. How many others are there? I asked. Pete scanned the room with his binoculars. I count 3 women total. Not exactly a group retreat. 3 women, 1 charismatic leader, an isolated location, and alcohol. The setup was so obvious it was almost insulting. We watched for 2 hours. Dr. Bell moved between the women like a gracious host, refilling wine glasses, touching shoulders, whispering in ears. The women giggled and preened under his attention, competing for his approval like teenagers at a school dance. Around midnight, one of the women, a redhead I didn't recognize, got up and walked toward what looked like a bedroom. Dr. Bell followed her, his hand on the small of her back. They disappeared from view. Amelia's face fell. She'd been expecting to be the chosen one. "This is sick," I muttered. "This is evidence," Pete corrected, adjusting his camera settings. "Keep watching." 20 minutes later, Dr. Bell returned alone, straightening his shirt. The redhead was nowhere to be seen. He sat back down with Amelia and the third woman, Jess, I realized, and continued the evening as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted in the group dynamic. Amelia was trying harder now, laughing louder, touching Dr. Bell's arm, competing more desperately for his attention. She was drunk, I realized. Drunker than I'd seen her in years. "We should go," I said. "I've seen enough." "Wait," Pete said, adjusting the audio equipment. "Listen to this." Through the sensitive microphones, we could hear fragments of conversation from inside the cabin. "Spiritual connection transcends conventional morality," Dr. Bell was saying. "But what about my husband?" That was Amelia's voice, slurred with wine and something else. "Your husband is trapped in the old paradigm. He can't understand the love we share." Love. The word hit me like a physical blow. "I feel so guilty," Amelia continued. "Guilt is just conditioning. Society's way of controlling your authentic self. Here, with me, you can be who you really are." I'd heard enough. I stood up, ready to march down to the cabin and drag my wife home. But Pete grabbed my arm. "Don't," he said quietly. "You'll blow everything. We need to let this play out. That's my wife in there. That's your wife making a choice, and we need to document that choice." He was right, but it didn't make it easier to watch. For the next hour, we observed Dr. Bell's seduction technique in action. He was skilled. I had to give him that. He knew exactly which buttons to push, which insecurities to exploit, which fantasies to feed. By 2 a.m., Jess had passed out on the couch. Amelia was barely conscious, leaning heavily against Dr. Bell as he whispered in her ear. His hands were wandering now, and she wasn't stopping him. "That's enough," I said, standing up. "I can't watch this anymore." Pete packed up his equipment without argument. We'd gotten what we came for. Clear evidence that Dr. Bell was sexually manipulating his followers, that the wellness retreat was a cover for something much darker. The drive home was silent. What was there to say? I just watched my wife choose another man, watched her throw away 18 years of marriage for a charlatan who saw her as nothing more than another conquest. At home, I checked on Tessa, who was sleeping peacefully in her bed. Whatever happened between Amelia and me, I had to protect her. She was the innocent in all this, the one who deserved better than parents who couldn't figure out how to love each other without destroying everything. I sat in my home office, staring at Pete's photos on my computer screen, clear, damning evidence of Dr. Bell's true nature. But would it be enough to save Amelia? Or was she too far gone? Too invested in the fantasy he'd sold her? My phone buzzed. Another text from Dr. Bell's number. "She's mine now. Stop fighting it." This time, I texted back. "We'll see about that." Because I wasn't done fighting, not for my marriage, that might already be over, but for my daughter, for the other women Dr. Bell was manipulating, for the principle that hunters shouldn't be allowed to destroy families without consequences. Dr. Henry Bell had made a mistake when he chose to target my wife. He'd picked a fight with someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by bringing him down. The war was just beginning. Amelia came home Sunday evening looking like she'd been through a spiritual blender. Her skin was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, and she moved with the careful precision of someone nursing a serious hangover. She barely acknowledged me or Tessa, heading straight upstairs for a shower that lasted over an hour. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a bathrobe with her hair in a towel, I was waiting in our bedroom with Pete's photographs spread across the bed. She stopped in the doorway, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally, defiance. "You followed me," she said. "I documented you," I corrected. "There's a difference." She moved closer, studying the images. Her face in the telephoto shots, laughing with Dr. Bell. His hands on her body, the wine glasses, the intimate setting, the obvious setup. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It looks like my wife getting drunk with a con artist who's been systematically manipulating her for months. You don't understand. Henry is helping me find myself. Henry is helping himself to married women with disposable income." I picked up one of the photos, a clear shot of Dr. Bell leading the redhead toward the bedroom. "How many spiritual connections did he make this weekend? Amelia's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, vulnerable, hurt, confused. Then the mask slipped back into place. You're just jealous because I'm growing beyond what you can offer me. I'm concerned because you're being manipulated by a hunter. I handed her Pete's research file. His real name is Henry Belmont. He's been running this scam for years, moving from city to city when the heat gets too high. He's not a doctor. He's not enlightened. And he doesn't give a damn about your spiritual growth. She flipped through the pages, her expression growing more defensive with each piece of evidence. This is fake, she said finally. You made this up because you can't handle me becoming independent. Call the Ohio State Medical Board. Check the court records yourself. It's all public information. I don't need to check anything. I know Henry. I know who he really is. You know who he's pretending to be. There's a difference. She threw the file back at me, papers scattering across the floor. You're pathetic, Will. Spying on me, making up lies, trying to control me with fear. I'm trying to save our marriage. There is no marriage. The words exploded out of her with surprising violence. There hasn't been for months. We're just two people living in the same house, pretending to be happy. The truth of it hit harder than I'd expected. She was right. We had been pretending. But I'd thought we were pretending until we could figure out how to be real again. She'd been pretending until she could find someone better. What about Tessa? I asked. What about her? She fainted at school because you've been starving her. The nurse threatened to call Child Protective Services. Tessa's fine. She's just detoxifying. She's 8 years old. She doesn't need to detoxify. She needs to eat actual food. You're being dramatic. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of Tessa's recent lunches. The wilted vegetables, the untouched sprouts, the desperate bite marks on carrot sticks. Look at her, Amelia. Really look at her. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt maybe, or guilt. But then, it was gone. Children are naturally resistant to healthy foods. Henry says, I don't give a damn what Henry says. I was shouting now, months of frustration boiling over. He's a con artist who's been feeding you BS while you slowly eliminate our daughter with your spiritual superiority. Don't you dare! I dare everything! This is my house, my family, my daughter who's been suffering while you play guru with a man who sees you as nothing more than another mark. We stood there breathing hard. 18 years of marriage reduced to this moment of raw honesty. Outside, I could hear Tessa's television playing in her room, the cheerful sounds of a cartoon providing soundtrack to our destruction. I'm leaving, Amelia said quietly. When? Tonight. I'll get a hotel room, find an apartment this week. And Tessa? She can stay with you until I get settled. Then we'll work out custody. Custody. The word hung in the air between us like a threat. Amelia, please. Think about what you're doing. This man has convinced you to abandon your family for what? A few weekends of feeling special? You don't understand what Henry and I have. I understand exactly what you have. I saw it this weekend. You're one of 3 women competing for the attention of a man who's sleeping with all of you. Her face went white. That's not true. Which part? That there were other women or that he's sleeping with them? She didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. Come with me, I said, making one last desperate play. Right now. We'll drive to the police station, file a report, expose him for what he is. We can get through this together. For a moment, I thought she might say yes. I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, scared and confused and looking for a way back to solid ground. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her expression hardened. Henry's worried about me. He says you might become violent. Violent? Amelia, I've never laid a hand on you in 18 years. Emotional violence is still violence, Will. She was quoting him now, using his words to rewrite our entire history. In Dr. Bell's version of reality, I was the misuser and he was the savior. It was a neat trick. Isolate the sufferer, then position yourself as their only source of safety. Pack whatever you need, I said, suddenly exhausted. I'll explain to Tessa in the morning. She nodded and began pulling clothes from the closet. Designer outfits, expensive shoes, all the trappings of the life we'd built together. It seemed absurd that a marriage could end with someone folding sweaters into a suitcase. Will, she said as I reached the door. Yeah? I did love you. For a long time, I really did. Past tense, the final nail in the coffin. I know, I said. I loved you too. After she left, I sat in Tessa's room, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful. So innocent. Tomorrow I'd have to explain why mommy wasn't here anymore, why our family was broken, why sometimes adults made choices that hurt everyone around them. But tonight, I just watched her breathe and promised myself that whatever happened next, I'd protect her. From Dr. Bell, from Amelia's delusions, from the ugly realities of divorce and custody battles. My phone buzzed one last time. Dr. Bell, gloating in victory. Thanks for making this easy. I turned off the phone and threw it in a drawer. Let him celebrate. Let him think he'd won. He had no idea what was coming for him. 3 weeks later, I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing divorce papers that read like an indictment of my character. According to Amelia's filing, I was controlling, emotionally abusive, and potentially dangerous to our daughter's well-being. She was seeking full custody, the house, and enough alimony to fund her new lifestyle. She's claiming you forced Tessa to eat unhealthy foods against her mother's wishes, my lawyer, Sarah Chen, said with barely concealed disgust. Apparently, feeding your child actual meals is now considered misuse. Can she win? Depends on the judge. Family court can be unpredictable, especially when one party presents well and tells a convincing story. Amelia had always been good at telling convincing stories. It's how she'd convinced herself that starving our daughter was spiritual enlightenment. What about the evidence against Dr. Bell? It helps establish a pattern of manipulation, but it doesn't directly address the custody issues. We need something more concrete. I'd been thinking the same thing. Pete's investigation had given us plenty of ammunition to destroy Dr. Bell's reputation, but reputation wasn't enough. We needed something that would force Amelia to see the truth about the man she'd chosen over her family. There might be a way, I said, pulling out my phone, but it's risky. That evening, I called the Wellness Center and asked to schedule a private consultation with Dr. Bell. The receptionist, still breathlessly enthusiastic, scheduled me for the following afternoon. May I ask what type of wellness goals you're hoping to achieve? She asked. My wife has been raving about Dr. Bell's work. I'm hoping he can help save my marriage. It wasn't entirely a lie. The next day, I sat in Dr. Bell's office, a space designed to project spiritual authority and material success. Crystals, expensive artwork, leather furniture that cost more than most people's cars. The man himself was exactly as I remembered. Tall, lean, silver-haired, with the kind of practiced charisma that probably worked on lonely housewives, but felt slimy and obvious up close. Will, he said, extending a hand I didn't take. I've heard so much about you. I'm sure you have. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Amelia is concerned about your resistance to change. She says you've been quite hostile to her growth. I've been hostile to watching my daughter starve while my wife plays dress-up with a con artist. His smile never wavered. I understand you're angry. Change is threatening to those who are invested in the status quo. What I'm invested in is my family, something you've systematically destroyed. I haven't destroyed anything, Will. I've simply helped Amelia discover who she really is underneath all the conditioning and compromise. You've helped her discover that she's the kind of person who abandons her child for a man who's sleeping with multiple women. That got a reaction. His smile flickered just for a moment. Amelia and I have a spiritual connection that transcends conventional morality, he said. Is that what you call it, when you get 3 women drunk and take turns sleeping with them? I think you're confused about what you think you saw. I think you're confused about who you're dealing with, I leaned forward. I know who you really are, Henry Belmont. I know about Ohio, about the lawsuits, about the pattern of fraud and sexual exploitation. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the calculating look of a hunter reassessing his prey. What do you want? He asked finally. I want you to leave my wife alone. That's not really up to me, is it? Amelia is a grown woman making her own choices. Amelia is a vulnerable woman being manipulated by a professional hunter. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air between us. He was confident, arrogant, certain that his carefully constructed facade would protect him from consequences. Men like Dr. Bell had been getting away with this behavior for so long that they'd forgotten it was actually illegal. I don't have to prove anything, I said. I just have to make sure the right people know the truth. And what truth is that? That you're running a sexual exploitation ring disguised as a wellness center. That you target married women going through life transitions. That you isolate them from their support systems, get them financially and emotionally dependent, then use that dependency for sexual gratification. That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious crime. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, still projecting calm authority. You know, Will, I think you're projecting. You're angry that your wife chose someone else, so you're creating elaborate conspiracy theories to avoid facing the simple truth. Which is that you weren't enough for her, that she needed something you couldn't provide. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I'd been expecting them. Men like Dr. Bell always went for the emotional jugular when they felt threatened. You're right, I said. I wasn't enough. I wasn't manipulative enough, wasn't carnivore enough, wasn't willing to exploit her vulnerabilities for my own gratification. I made the mistake of treating her like an equal partner instead of a mark to be conned. Is that what you think I'm doing? I know that's what you're doing. The question is whether you're smart enough to stop before this gets worse for you. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. Leave town, close the wellness center, disappear back to whatever rock you crawled out from under, or stay and face the consequences of what you've done. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think you can intimidate me? You're a middle-aged suburban engineer having a midlife crisis. I've dealt with angry husbands before. Have you dealt with angry husbands who have nothing left to lose? Something in my tone must have gotten through to him because his expression shifted slightly. What exactly are you planning to do? Whatever it takes to protect my daughter and expose you for what you are. I stood up, our meeting clearly over. You have 1 week to make your decision. After that, the choice gets taken away from you. Will, he called as I reached the door. You should know that Amelia and I are planning to get married as soon as your divorce is final. She's going to be very happy. I turned back to him, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I smiled. Henry, I said, you have no idea how wrong you are. Because I'd been recording our entire conversation on my phone, and Dr. Bell had just admitted to everything I needed him to admit to. His arrogance had finally become his weakness. The war wasn't over, but the tide had just turned. The recording was pure gold. In his arrogance, Dr. Bell had essentially confessed to running a carnivore operation, targeting vulnerable women and using manipulation tactics that bordered on psychological misuse. But more importantly, he'd revealed his true nature, the cold calculation behind the spiritual facade. I made copies of everything. The recording, Pete's investigation files, the photos from the retreat, the financial records showing his unreported income. Then I began making phone calls. The first call went to Detective Maria Rodriguez at the state police. She specialized in fraud cases and had a reputation for going after hunters who hid behind professional credentials. This is interesting, she said after reviewing the evidence I'd sent her. We've been getting complaints about this wellness center for months, but nothing concrete enough to act on. This changes things. What happens now? We open an official investigation. With your recording and the financial evidence, we can probably get warrants for his property and business records. The second call went to Channel 7's investigative reporter, a woman named Janet Mills, who'd built her career exposing local corruption and fraud. This is exactly the kind of story we love, she said. Fake guru preying on suburban housewives. It's got everything. Sex, money, betrayal, and a clear villain. When can we meet? The third call was the hardest. I phoned Amelia at the apartment she'd rented near the wellness center. Will, what do you want? I want you to listen to something. I played her the recording of my conversation with Dr. Bell. All of it. His admission of manipulation, his casual dismissal of her feelings, his arrogant certainty that he could control everyone around him. The silence on the other end stretched for almost a full minute. That's not... He wouldn't, she started, then stopped. Amelia, he's not who you think he is. He never was. You edited this. You made it sound worse than it was. I can send you the original file. You can have it analyzed by experts, but deep down you know I'm telling the truth. Another long silence. Even if some of this is true, it doesn't change how I feel about him. It should... You don't understand what we have. I understand exactly what you have. You're one of several women he's manipulating for money and sex. You're not special to him, Amelia. You're just convenient. I heard her crying softly on the other end of the line. Come home, I said gently. Bring Tessa home. We can work through this. I can't. It's too late. It's never too late to choose your family. But she'd already hung up. 2 days later, the story broke. Janet Mills had done her homework, interviewing former sufferers, financial experts, and law enforcement officials. The segment was devastating. a methodical destruction of Dr. Bell's credibility that left no doubt about his true nature. The wellness center was closed pending investigation. Dr. Bell's assets were frozen. And suddenly, Amelia found herself alone in her expensive apartment with no income, no support system, and no charismatic leader to tell her what to think. She called me that evening. "Will, can we talk?" "Of course." "Not on the phone. Can you come over?" I found her sitting on the floor of her mostly empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of belongings that looked strange and out of place without the context of our shared life. She'd been crying, and she looked smaller somehow, like the collapse of her fantasy had physically diminished her. "I saw the news," she said. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way." "Are you? You destroyed him. You destroyed everything." "I exposed him. There's a difference." She was quiet for a long time, picking at the carpet with her fingers like a child. "Was any of it real?" she asked finally. "Your feelings were real. Your need for something different in your life was real. He just used those real things to manipulate you. I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You're human. These guys are professionals. They know exactly how to find and exploit vulnerabilities." Tessa must hate me. Tessa misses her mother. She doesn't understand why you left, but she doesn't hate you. What happens now? It was a good question. The legal proceedings would take months. Dr. Bell would probably go to prison, but that didn't undo the damage he'd caused. Marriages were still broken, families still scattered, trust still shattered. "That depends on what you want to happen." "I want to come home," she said quietly. "But I don't know if I can. I don't know if you'll let me." "Amelia, I never wanted you to leave. I wanted you to see the truth about what was happening to our family. And now that I see it, now we figure out how to put the pieces back together." It wasn't that simple, of course. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. Amelia moved back into the house, but into the guest bedroom. We started couples counseling with a real therapist, not a charismatic con artist with fake credentials. Tessa was the happiest of all of us. She gained weight quickly once her mother stopped forcing raw vegetables on her, and the dark circles under her eyes disappeared. Children are resilient when the adults in their lives finally start acting like adults. The divorce papers were withdrawn. The custody battle never materialized. Dr. Bell was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and sexual exploitation. Several of his sufferers, emboldened by the media coverage, came forward with their own stories. Jess disappeared entirely, apparently moving to California to find herself in a different kind of spiritual community. I wish them luck with her. 6 months later, Amelia and I were sitting on our back deck, watching Tessa play in the yard. She was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Real bread, real peanut butter, real joy in simple pleasures. "Do you think we'll make it?" Amelia asked. "I think we have a chance," I said, "if we're both willing to do the work." "I'm willing. So am I." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still had problems, still had trust issues to work through, still had the memory of how close we'd come to losing everything. But we also had something Dr. Bell had never understood. The stubborn, imperfect, complicated love of people who'd chosen each other and were willing to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Saw the news about Bell's sentencing, drinks to celebrate?" I looked at my wife, my daughter, my imperfect but real family, and typed back, "Rain check. I'm exactly where I need to be." Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's building something so good, so real, so worth protecting that their attempts to tear it down only make it stronger. Dr. Henry Bell had tried to steal my family. Instead, he'd helped me remember why they were worth fighting for.